Hey everyone, Yasin here, and welcome to another episode of Pointy Chins, where I take you through my art journey. Alright, so to begin with, we have some heads and person with very, very black lips. And I don't know if I've done this before, but if you ever see this, what it means is usually I fucked up on the mouth, so I probably drew the lips in a position that wasn't working, and I tried to correct it. And I kept trying to correct it, and eventually it just looked so bad. It looked like a mess of different mouth positions that I just create this humongous black shape to hide my shame of not making the mouths correct. But yeah, playing around with mouths, trying to remember, things like keeping it so when you look inside the mouth, you see the teeth going back in space, stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty basic, I guess, but still something I kind of work on and try to remember. This guy's funny. All right. So with this one, I was thinking of just these, I don't know, the political people, the news reporter people, and how some of them look really boring, and I tried to create a boring person. Just kind of a tired guy wearing a suit, and just a bunch of little faces as well. Decided to flesh him out a bit, and came out looking like this, which, I don't know, it's okay. It's not great. It's not clear, it's not the best, but I suppose it's not terrible either. And in this case, trying to make the breaths follow the form of the ribcage. This is something I've been working on quite a bit, is this ribcage and understanding it, and understanding there's like this corner here. And this one's probably much too high. Probably down here would be better. But there's like a corner of the ribcage, and it follows a rhythm. See here? There's this corner, and it kind of goes down towards the crotch. And I guess here it's explained better. Like this line goes down, and then it follows this into the abs, and then goes down to the crotch and sort of comes back up. And I find it's quite helpful as a guide in order to see, how do you connect the top of the torso to the bottom of the torso? And that seems to be pretty helpful. So here, bringing out the brush pen again. Not sure I like any of these really. I'll try and do things like experiment with how small I can make the eyes and the features, and these ones are just sort of one line that I continuously go through. And then, so a lot of things that I've noticed with features is you can make them much, much smaller than you might think, and they'll still look okay. Because I guess that's just from exaggeration. We exaggerate features in our minds. We think they take up more space than they actually do, or at least I know I do. When I see eyes, I tend to always make them, even when I think I'm making them small, I tend to make them still bigger than they would be in reality. But I'm trying to bring it over to cartoons or more, stylized images, and see, how small can I make it, and does it still maintain a stylistic view? So here it's things like, even with the mouth, trying to make a big mouth, but keeping the teeth in proportion. I'm thinking a lot about design in terms of negative and positive space. So you have this big shape, and then you have the shape of the teeth, and you have the shape of the gums, and you have the tongue, and how much real estate are each element taking up, or is each element taking up? Here I'm not quite sure. Kind of like this one, it feels pretty structural. So whenever you can sort of sense a box within a face, I think, or anything, if you can sort of see a box in it, tends to be a good sign that you're creating structural images. And this one is also okay. This perspective, again, it's super off. It bothers me seeing this because this line that goes like this and this line that goes like this is pretty much not anything because it should be going this way. It should be like, again, I think I've mentioned it before. If you find a spot on one of the features, you should be able to draw a line and connect it to the same part. So let's say this is the middle of the eye, okay? And this is the middle of the eye here. So you connect those two and they should be on a line, and that will tell you what the perspective is. And then everything else should sort of follow that. So with things like the eyebrows, they can move a lot more. So you're not going to use the eyebrows as a check. You know, like I'm not going to say, well, this is the top of the eyebrow and this is the top of the eyebrow, so let's connect those, because you can move those. But the eye itself is fixed inside. I mean, the eyeball can move around, but the eye socket is just bone. So it's much better to find these bony landmarks and then connect them than to use anything that's muscly. Like the lips are basically, they can move around a lot. So unless the person's very relaxed, I tend to use bony landmarks to create perspective, but clearly not in that one at all. So yeah, some figure drawings. This one's got okay gesture. This one's cool. I like how sharp and pointy everything is. I found that it's kind of hard to see things as pointy at first. So I've learned that it's better to start loose and curvy because that's what works for me. That's more how I can visualize things. And then when you've got that, to sharpen it. So you might be able to see it, you might not, but there is like, this did start pretty rounded. And then you can see like this was probably the original head shape. And then I just strengthened it to turn it into this pointy sharp shape. And that's something that basically, as long as the line is darker, the one that you want people to look at, people are going to look at that one and they're not going to look at the original lines, so long as the original lines are more thin and less defined. So it's a tip to keep in mind when drawing, that you should really look for where the line, or if you have a bunch of straight lines, just make the other lines that you want to show darker. Now, this also has a different side to it, which is that sometimes when you draw, like let's say I was drawing this line, right? And I got it wrong. And so I tried to draw it again, and then I tried to draw it again and again. What's going to happen is those lines are going to overlap each other and they're going to get darker. So if you make a mistake, it's best not to keep screwing with it. Like sometimes it's better to just move on to a different area rather than to keep emphasizing the mistake, because that's what you're kind of doing. If you keep drawing over an incorrect line when you're not sure what you're doing, you're just strengthening the mistake. Unless you're getting the correct lines dark, it doesn't really help. So here I'm thinking about, gesture. I'm going constantly, like you can see the shitty perspective again. But I'm going between gesture, interesting shapes, and structure, and anatomy, I guess. So I wouldn't say this is a good page. Maybe this guy's head is okay and this one's body's okay. But that's pretty much what I'm dealing with right now. And then the other big thing is connecting the head to the body and making them work, because I've drawn so many faces, so much that my faces seem to be better than my bodies, and I never connected the two properly. So I'm trying to do that, and here one of my ideas was to just go back to something more realistic for a while, like kind of don't worry about the style too much, and then get the structure and the anatomy down. And then all I have to deal with are gesture and stylization and shapes and stuff. So these two are Joe Mad's studies. He's great at all those things I mentioned. So that's why very, very likely to look at his stuff. So here again, there's that box in the rib cage that I'm trying to get. I don't know if you can see it, but I find it really helpful. I think Rake made a video on how to draw women or something. Rake is spelled R-E-I-Q. And he uses boxes as well. So I think it's good to check him out. So here there's not really any structure to the rib cage. You can see here there's sort of this corner, and here there isn't. So this just looks flat. This sort of, I don't know, just looks like this flat shape, and it's hard to get the structure. Even with the arms, it's hard to see any structure. So with this one, because you have the corner indication, it tells your brain, okay, there is a structure here underneath this. This is one form, and then this goes down. So you have 1, 2, and then, well, the crotch and the pelvis are another form. But yeah, see, like here, you can feel, because you have this, you can feel the three-dimensionality of it. Whereas with this guy, you really can't as much, because he's just, I mean, that's also stylized, so you could make the argument that you're not supposed to, you know, add that much structure, or it's not as necessary. But I still think it's good to have it in there. Here I was trying compositional studies again. I tend to do these every once in a while, usually when I don't know what to draw or I'm feeling lost. So I guess for a while I've been pretty, at this point anyway, I was pretty lost. So here I'm thinking about little things like design and decoration, what that would look like, composition. I suppose this isn't a great composition because the figure is pretty much taking up all the space, but that's also part of the experimenting, is just seeing, okay, how much can I fill and what does it look like? Is it okay? Is it not okay? Yeah. All right. So back to some stylized figures. So I did this woman first, and then this guy, and then I thought, well, okay, so these are very, I don't know, athletic figures. So let me try to do some guy that's not at all athletic, and something that's really hard is to make because I can do like a guy like this, and it's like, fine, okay, this guy doesn't look athletic, but he doesn't really feel like he fits in the same world as this guy. So that's a huge problem. You want the style to be consistent. You want everyone to sort of fit in the same world. You might have seen artists that have the problem that I do, where the characters don't quite fit, and it just kind of breaks it. For me anyway, it breaks the illusion when you don't have someone fitting in the world. So here, pretty much explicit with this ribcage thing in the pelvis. You can see how they're boxes, and then you have whatever random accessories. So I would say on this page, I'm concerning myself most with gesture. This guy's, I don't know if he's blocking his ears or whatever, putting his hands on his ears. Yeah, trying to make some foreshortened stuff, kind of coil technique stuff. This one's okay. I like the energy in this. So it's all built off this basic, I suppose there's two big thrusts. There's this one that goes towards the head, and then there's this one that comes around the leg. And I always recommend people do this to combine the arms into one shape, or see how you can kind of go from this arm right into that arm, or this leg right into that leg. Instead of just thinking about it in terms of anatomy and thinking like, okay, so this leg goes from this foot to this knee, then from this knee to the hip, and now we're in the pelvis. So now I'll draw a pelvis. And then from the pelvis, you go to that hip, and then you go to that knee. It creates a very disjointed figure that can be very stiff. But if you break it down into one big rhythmic shape, like a force, an energy going in one direction, then you build the anatomy on top of that, and the anatomy just follows it. It doesn't break that dynamism, I guess you could call it. So here is probably an example of what not to do. See how it doesn't really flow that well from this arm? This leg doesn't really flow into that leg. So yeah, don't do this. These ones are just terrible. Okay, so this floating person, it's okay. I mean, clearly it's not in perspective, but there is more energy present. And I'm pretty sure, just glancing at what I was doing, that's really the thing I was thinking about, is just energy. Yeah, so this guy, he's kind of got it, whereas some of these people don't. This guy's okay, you know, sort of. Or is it a girl? Yeah, I guess it's a girl. Like punching. Trying to be loose and not worry at all about anything other than capturing energy. And I think here's where I started really, I guess all of these are where I started to hone my thing of making the limbs sort of like big triangular shapes. You can kind of see it here. It starts with this triangle, it just ends at a point, and then you build the anatomy on top. Same with the arms, and one of my students calls it tentacle limbs, because they kind of are like fat tentacles, and I guess that's fair. They're like tentacle limbs, but yeah, this is where I started doing that. So I was trying to see how far I could take that. And it seems to be working pretty well. You basically resolve things into these big, simple shapes, and then you make them more complicated over time. Is there anything worth talking about here? I don't think so. All right. So here's a basic form of what I'm talking about. I mean, it kind of looks like a baby in a onesie, but in a stretched out thing. So you start with the head, and then the arms and even the whole body just gets resolved into this very basic shape. And this figure was built off this figure. So even though you start with these types of basic shapes, you can quickly turn them into something that's not. Here's an example of the leg coming forward. Like, it looks kind of stupid like this, but if I was to flesh this out, it would look okay, I think. So yeah, it helps with things like crossing arms, because you draw this tentacle. It's easier to get a sense of where things go if they're in super simple forms, or at least for me. And then after you've got that, then it's kind of like you've now built, you know how you can look in clouds and see shapes? Well, that's because the cloud's already made, or it already has a certain shape. So then it's easier to project something on something that already exists than something that doesn't exist. So the idea here is get rid of the white of the page and get the pose, the energy, the gesture, and then flesh it out after, knowing that it's going to be easier to flesh out something with something on the page. So here, trying to be more structural. This leg is too long. Trying to do more dynamic poses, but with a bigger body. I don't think it works as well. And then going for these long necks. Again, it's just a way of connecting the head to the body, because the head itself is pretty stylized and it works within its own rules, but the bodies are not quite working. So I look for things like this big long line from this going tweet and then going all the way into this. And then maybe like, I guess I can see how it's trying to go like this and then into that arm. So whenever you can take one form and another form and sort of combine them, see like this, it creates a pretty appealing design. So here, just trying some, I don't know, domestic scene, kind of a K drawing. Still experimenting with the neck. Like, okay, I guess this kind of works. I feel like it kind of works. So I think when everything is equally stylized, then it's okay. But when some parts are more realistic and some parts are more stylized, then it really doesn't work. So this one kind of works because she has this almost light bulb head. Whereas this one doesn't feel like it works so much. It feels like the body is a bit too realistic, but the head and neck are not. And then this one kind of is working better, but he doesn't have a body. This one, I'm trying to replicate the shape of the head in the body, but do it in the reverse. So it's kind of like this shape is big, and then it gets skinny, and then it's skinny, and then it gets big. So almost like a peanut shape. And that creates cohesion. So that's what I'm thinking about. I don't know, this looks like a pretty bad day. Not really sure what I'm doing, but this guy's funny. Yeah, this one is... I don't like this person's design, but the anatomy is kind of working. Like this body, at least to this point, like the legs I'm not sure about entirely, but this part kind of feels like one thing. Feels like, yeah, okay, that shape works. This monster guy is okay. And I like this person. That's pretty cool. It's got a good sense of rhythm and energy. I just added some shapes around to have, I guess, some designy thing, but it kind of feels like whenever you have debris, it makes a person look like they're doing more stuff. I notice this a lot in Dragon Ball whenever they power up, like rocks and stuff fly into the air. And it just makes it look like, well, if you're affecting something, that must be pretty powerful. So it's a bit like when you have a character running and then they kind of are kicking up dust, like a plume of dust. Well, that implies that they must be going fast to do that. So sometimes if you want to make something have a big effect, it's not so much the thing that you need to worry about as opposed to the things that it's affecting. If that makes any sense, I really hope it does. Yeah, so this one's okay. This one, struggling, trying to get the head to match the body. This one's arm feels far too long. And I don't know what's going on here. If they're holding on, it doesn't feel like it's tense enough to be holding something. Playing around with designs, just shapes here. Trying to put, I guess, patterns or something throughout just to get more of that. I want to be someone who can draw cool patterns and stuff, but it seems like the only thing I really like drawing are faces, and then it kind of shows because when I get to the body, I don't, especially when I'm dealing with detail, it doesn't seem to be sticking as much. I have a lot more difficulty with it. And I don't want that to be the case. I want to be able to draw like bodies as cool or whatever as, I don't know if I can draw faces well, but you know, more like my faces. So here, thinking about just basic design things like, okay, so you have this and you have two stripes. Where do you put them? Decided, okay, I'll put them here. On this one, put them here, which is kind of boring. This one decided, okay, put the stripes here. And here I'm playing around with foreshortening. Okay, this, terrible. And this guy, yeah, I'm constantly thinking about how much can I get away with? What if I push it this much, but it just doesn't work because I fleshed this part out too much? So the more crazy I make it, the less realistic I'm allowed to make it. Because if I make it realistic in certain parts, like putting correct anatomy or even somewhat correct anatomy, it seems to start looking wrong pretty quickly. So I guess that's a huge thing, just realizing like, okay, so your face is very, like, let's say this face, it's very simple. You've stylized the eyes, you've shrunken the nose a lot, and you've made the mouth very minimalistic, the nose very minimalistic, everything's very minimal. So then you have to do that with the body too. So it wouldn't make sense to add like tons of folds and shading and muscles here and everywhere, because it's just not going to match. So, I mean, this is probably simple for most of the viewers, so I'm sorry if my thing's like, oh, well, this is a thing. But yeah, it's something I'm struggling with, so I guess it wouldn't be honest if I didn't mention that, yeah, I really do struggle with getting the heads to match the figures. This guy's pretty... I don't find him attractive at all, but I know what I was thinking of. So what I was thinking is, when you look at this character, you'll notice like the brow comes out quite a bit, and then the nose comes out a lot, and then the mouth goes in. And that's a shape. But if you think about the big shape, the nose isn't coming out that much if you think of this as one shape. It's like, how much real estate is it really taking up? So maybe you can think like there's one, that's like how much is popping out, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's like 1/6 maybe of the entire form. And then with this one, I tried to minimize it as much as I could. So I still wanted a brow ridge. So I made that change, but then there's a slope here, and then there's very little actual negative space here. And that's what I was going for. And I thought of this term, the angle of maximum impact, which is basically the angle that you can get away with, that you can make a sharp enough angle and change the form, but maintain the least amount of increase in negative space. So I don't know, that sounds like it's not that easy to explain. But for instance, like I don't want to use angles that are really flat. I want to use like more closer to 90-degree angles, but not make them look super apparent. So this one, you have like a big angle here and then a big angle here, big changes. But within from this to this, you could almost think of this as a line. So you have huge shifts, but they don't seem so. And it creates like this impactful thing. I don't know if what I'm saying is nonsense. It makes sense in my head, but I don't know if it makes sense out of my head. All right, so this guy, thinking of a basic gesture, one shape. He's really just like, okay, maybe you add the head and it's one line here, but then this whole thing can be one line. And same with this guy, this person, sort of the same way. Maybe like a stick of gum, sort of folded a bit. This guy's pushing everything out, making his head back, and everything comes forward. That's what I'm trying to... I kind of like some of what... I don't like what happens here, because it feels like it breaks it, and a lot of it is just by feeling. So just looking at this, it feels like that starts to lose whatever coherence it had. But at this point, kind of feels good. Like this still feels pretty cool. And again, I stretched the face a lot. Tried to think about the size of the features. You'll notice how small the eyes have gotten. Like really small. Here the eyes are pretty small. So I guess that's also something I was considering. Because the important thing is pretty much with all art, what defines it other than the idea is contrast. So if I have a lot of negative space and very little positive space, or a lot of positive space and very little negative space, it's going to look good. or it's going to create a lot of contrast. So by shrinking the features, I'm actually doing that. I'm creating a lot more negative space. See all this negative space. It's much bigger than this positive space, which would be the eyebrow and the eye. So trying to think about things like that. Here I'm using reference. I think this one and this one, this one and this one are probably this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are probably from reference. This one's doesn't look like he's from reference at all. And this one doesn't look like from reference. But I'm still sort of struggling with the body here. This one is okay. This one sort of feels like one thing. So this one is feels like a big failure because this just looks way too small, like this torso. If you had a box for the rib cage, this would be the corner of the box, and then the pelvis are way too close. There's not enough space, so you have to push this part down or this whole area up. And it looks like I was just having a bad day. I have a lot of those lately. Bad days. Playing around with foreshortening here. So I wanted that fist to come forward, so I put darker lines to bring that forward. But I don't feel like it's successful. Like I wouldn't call this a success. And also, there's so many lines on this, so few lines in the face that it doesn't match. Like the styles don't connect. And that's a problem. And for this, it's actually leading into next month, which is going to be pretty different actually, because I'm going to be working on a comic. So you will see that in this next month's episode. But this is the beginning of it. So I'm working with a guy called OzJ, and he made this comic called Freelance. And basically, he was having some doubts about it. And I thought, well, your comic's cool, so let me try doing my take on it. And he thought that would be interesting as well. So I started working on his character. So here are just some concept sketches, I guess, for characters within his story. And as I mentioned in the next month's episode, I'm going to be going much more in detail, and actually I'm going to be doing pages from the comic itself. So yeah, here's just some more stuff. Here's the main character. He's very, I don't know. Well, the character's name is also OzJ in the story, so it's pretty kind of autobiographical, I suppose, in some ways. But I just like the character because he's not like this cool character, really. Like maybe he can do cool things, I guess, but he's kind of more of a nerd and a loser type, which I guess I relate to. So there's that. Yeah, and then just more designy things, kind of working on different faces and what things could be. And this thing is just that shape thing. You know, here's a big shape, a smaller shape, and then another small shape. Turn it into like a dragon's head, I guess. Yeah, so pretty much, kind of like this guy. Pretty much that's it. And stay tuned for the next episode because it's going to be pretty different. So I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.